job's a joke, you broke, your love life's the your way. It's like you're always stuck in second gear, when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year. But I'll be there for you when the rain starts to fall. I'll be there for you.
So Friends, where to begin? The iconic sitcom benchmark is now 27 years old, and still trending to this day thanks to the recent HBO reunion special. The show that gave us warmth in our hearts and turkeys on our heads is still very much in vogue to this day. Just ask us Irish about the recent wave of Matt LeBlanc Irish uncle memes. Not only that, but its many timeless moments are forever imprinted in both our minds and our common cultural DNA. We can all remember exactly where we were in our lives when we first saw one of its many iconic moments. But is Friends more than simply popular? Was it more than just eye candy and a brain break? Should Friends be remembered for its artistic merits, as well as simply how it made us feel? After all, if it isn't, then it's nothing more than the television equivalent of that irritating pop song that we all know we hate, but can't stop humming nonetheless. I guess what we're trying to ask here is, was Friends actually important? Was it groundbreaking? And above all else, has it aged well?
I'll be there for you, 'cause you're there for me too. You're still in bed at 10 and work again at 8. You burned your breakfast so far, things are going.
So here we go. Friends, the good stuff. Number 1, Phoebe Buffay is the darkest, bravest sitcom character ever. Now what do I mean by this? Well, if you've seen the show, you should already know. But in this case, here's a resume. Following a tragic childhood, Phoebe lived on the streets. She's estranged from her cruel and sociopathic twin sister Ursula. She used to mug people just to avoid starvation. Oh, and yes, there's that time she had her brother's semen implanted into her body. So it's fair to say that Phoebe Buffay is a character who's had it tough. But that's actually not what's so remarkable about her. What's so remarkable about this character is how joyful and upbeat she is. In spite of years of hardship and abuse, things that would essentially ruin a real person, and lead most fictional characters to become, well, the Joker or something, Phoebe is presented with a childlike innocence and glee, an unabashed optimism, and even characteristics that make her the heart and warmth of the show. This achievement is not to be overlooked. Lisa Kudrow and the show's writing and production team have walked a tightrope between comedy and tragedy, and emerged with a character that 99% of writers would portray as a cynical basket case, but which they have consistently portrayed as a beacon of light and optimism. I guess they saved the nastiness for Ursula. 2. The one with the things that aged well. Though known for being frivolous in tone, it should be noted that Friends was unafraid to tackle the difficult issues, such as Monica and Chandler's distinctly unfunny reaction to being unable to conceive, Chandler coming to terms with his own prejudice regarding his arguably transgender father, Monica and Richard discovering their incompatibility, or virtually torturing us with Ross and Rachel. Friends never rested on its fame and success by sticking to a formula. Instead, it was always willing to take risks and address the difficult and controversial issues, suggesting a decade-long willingness to move forward and adapt creatively. Of course, we'll take the now controversial Fat Monica to be more of a comedic thing. 3. The iconic moment generator. It seems at times that a pre-programmed iconic moment generating app couldn't deliver as many genuine, off-the-cuff and totally unforgettable TV moments as Friends actually did. Moments that linger in the consciousness for a lifetime. To demonstrate, please enjoy this montage.
What was that?
Maybe if I wasn't going commando. Yeah. Whew. I'll tell you, it's hot with all this stuff on. I better not do any, lunges. Okay.
I gotta tell you, this really does put me in a better mood.
So, how do you kids like your coffee?
Oh, none for me.
Just a little bit of sugar.
Well, maybe I'll bring it out and have Monica stick her finger in it. That ought to sweeten it up, huh? Luigi. I, Ross.
Hi, Ross.
Take thee, Emily.
Take thee, Rachel. Emily. Emily.
And here comes a contentious one. 4. The Trouble with Ross. Debated. Yes, you knew we had to go there. If you've been on the internet in the last decade or so, then you already know that the character of Ross Geller has been, shall we say, up for debate in recent times. Dozens of articles and mini-docs have surfaced, making the claims that Ross's attitude towards relationships, his friends, anger management, and even latent homophobia have not aged well. Ross Geller, it seems, has been retconned by 21st century society as the toxic friend. I mean, should we even mention how creepy the character gets without a laugh track?
Great class.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I was watching. Hey, a couple of questions though. You know about that last move where that woman tripped you and then pinned you to the floor? What would you do next?
Well, then she'd take her keys and try to jam them in you.
No. What would you do next?
Who, me, the attacker?
Yes, that's right.
Why?
I tried attacking 2 women, did not work.
Now, we at IP are not here necessarily to change minds on this topic. However, I will present a brief character study, in order to perhaps begin to explain why this character may have these traits that some would deem to be problematic. He was spoiled from birth. It is made clear from the beginning of the show that Ross was his parents' favourite child, clearly preferred to Monica. His parents have an impossibly idyllic view of Ross, telling him that his very birth was a medical marvel, and finding it impossible to believe that he could have ever smoked pot, believing instead that Chandler smoked pot in his bedroom instead. His parents' irrational admiration of him could possibly account for some of the self-entitlement in his adulthood. His first wife left him for a woman. Adding to Ross's problems are the fact that his first wife Carol, the second love of his life after Rachel, turned out to be a lesbian and left him for Susan, a woman with whom he does not enjoy a very warm relationship. Surely this is the kind of incident that could lead to trust issues going forward, especially when there is a child involved. Could it even account for some of Ross's homophobic behaviour later in life? We'll let you be the judge. Finally, there is the small matter of the love of your life routinely rejecting you from your adolescence right up until your mid-30s. Ross was in love with Rachel for decades, yet both were unable to seal the deal for years, and had to endure denying their feelings and living a lie for most of their adult lives. This included both of them having relationships and even children whilst apart. It could not have been easy on either of them. We now even know that actors David Schwimmer and Jennifer Aniston secretly harboured feelings for each other throughout the whole period of filming. Feelings which the actors actively channeled into the characters of Ross and Rachel. Overall, Ross Geller is a complex and multi-layered character. You may love him or hate him, but you cannot deny that his character complexity does contradict the idea that Friends represents one-dimensional shallow entertainment. His complexity, it seems, is the point.
Something wrong? No, nothing.
And 5. They got out while the going was good. Finally, it may well be worth noting that Friends knew when to walk away. You see, shows are a bit like athletes. They have their time when their tools are sharp and their message is clear, before eventually growing slow and flabby and often ending as shells of their former selves. Yet Friends walked away elegantly after 10 seasons. Yes, season 9 and 10 in particular may have had some patchy moments, but hey, at least they bowed out more gracefully than a certain other sitcom we know. The one with the critique. Okay, so criticising a cultural phenomenon like Friends is never an easy task, But the show has in fact drawn various critiques over the decades, both contemporaneous and in retrospect. These will inevitably fall into two broad categories: character studies and social impact. Now, first of all, since the show made its name on, well, its name, let's break down the show's iconic characters one by one to see what critics over the years have identified as perhaps their shortcomings. We'll start with Ross, the likeable if emotionally stunted professor. He has more than any other character always divided opinion for the way his behaviour falls between being emotionally needy or at times borderline psychotic. Whether it's overcompensating for Joey and Rachel's dalliance by being fine with it, playing a game of romantic brinkmanship with a new date, or hyper-obsessing over a certain sandwich, his behaviour never really fits the professor mould it's poured into. I mean, seriously, would you want to be sharing a workplace canteen with this guy? Rachel next, and if Ross can be said to be too needy for his own good, then Rachel, for her part, seems to want to cripple his happiness with anyone else he dates. Particularly the perfectly nice and unoffending Julie. He even showed up in London to disrupt his wedding to Emily. Then later, when Monica suggests that Rachel can now rightfully reconnect with Ross, the latter replies that she is not into recently divorced men. To which Monica, Ross's sister, retorts, "Right, you only go for them 5 minutes before they're married." There is some truth to that. Then we get to Joey, the everyman, the ladies' man, the journeyman. But that's just it, isn't it? Joey goes on no journey at all to speak of. After 10 seasons, he ends the show exactly where he started, and actually has become less sophisticated as the series continued. As some of the other characters became more nuanced and layered, Joey simply became a caricature of himself. All culminating in the bizarre and utterly incredulous French lesson from season 10.
Okay, let's try it one syllable at a time. Okay, so repeat after me. Je m'appelle.
Pelle.
Great. Okay, faster. Je m'appelle.
Pelle.
Je m'appelle.
Me poupou.
He began to typify the golden rule of lazy comedy writing: simplify and add stupid. Merde. Phoebe, the slightly ditzy new age faux folk singer, suffers from a similar complaint to Joey, in that she never really seems to go anywhere as a character. Although cleverly written in certain aspects, and certainly the emotional centre of the group throughout the show, she never evolves to take on useful traits from any other characters she encounters. Or as the little matter of, let's see, stealing her husband from his fiancée and being totally okay with it illustrates. The show is not above shifting her behaviour nonsensically to serve any particular plot that she needs to serve. Chandler, or as people lukewarm to the show dubbed him, the funny one, is another character that has attracted more attention and criticism in hindsight than at the time. Originally written as an openly gay character, the showrunners ultimately cooled to the idea and changed his orientation before everything was finalised. So far, so straight. However, perhaps due to time constraints or some other reason, they kept the gay DNA and behaviourisms of the character intact. So in a classic moment of write him gay, play him straight, we're led to believe that this completely straight guy, who uses sarcasm to mask his own insecurities, could totally and earnestly get a Brian. And last we come to Monica, the compulsive clean freak. The ultimate criticism of Monica tends to land on the fact that she has a tendency to be hypocritical of others, whilst the writing team of the show never seems to notice. She can become a drill sergeant, and she'll certainly be clear if she's upset or angry about someone doing something she doesn't approve of. So when Monica took charge of Phoebe's wedding, and went overboard without irony, it was a bit much, given what would happen if the reverse had been true. She detests Chandler's work laugh, even saying that she actually respected Chandler more without it. However, considering her own plan to use Joey to get her co-workers to like her, she should have been more understanding, given how he only used it to keep the peace at work. Finally, audiences would think that after her struggle with food, she'd be a tad more understanding of Chandler's smoking habit. But alas, hypocrisy, thy name is Monica. So now that that's over and done with, it's on to the wider criticism of the show from a more general perspective. Like most shows that went on for 10 years, Friends couldn't always maintain the quality of its plot lines. The last couple of seasons were weaker than much of what came before it, with some questionable storylines and an overall feeling of been there, done that. Whilst this show was undisputably strong for the first 7 years, it perhaps started to slide after that, reaching its nadir at season 8, before clawing back some of the quality for one final push during season 10. To critics, the main problem was that the humour became broader, and the characters became less well-rounded, relying increasingly on the familiar themes, for example Joey being the ever dumber one, Monica the obsessive one, etc. In the early seasons they were far more relatable. You were with them against the world. You wanted to be a part of that group. In the later seasons, however, whether intentionally or not, we were increasingly asked to laugh at the friends and how ridiculous their behaviour was becoming. This leads us to one of Friends' more inane legacies, the hyper-superficial portrayal of the real world that it bestowed on Gen Xers and millennials as they grew up. The show seemed to broadcast an image of the city life we'd all like to lead, of the cast living in nice big New York apartments, shirking many of their responsibilities, and acting immaturely into their 40s, continuing emerging adulthood as an ever-increasing and prolonged trend. A place where the sofa in your favourite coffee house was always available, night and day.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my own.
For a decade, the cast of Friends presented a unique balance between making us laugh and giving us reason to cry. Chandler, Ross, Rachel, Monica, Phoebe and Joey were all likeable, relatable TV characters, who presented a sitcom format that may have kept the comedy on the family couch, but moved that couch to a cosy New York City coffee shop, and created the family out of a unique group of friends. Yes, it was slick and glossy, providing critics with easy ammo, but Friends was rarely less than consistently funny and comforting. It was a rare media product that seemed close to our hearts, but with its finger on the pulse of contemporary culture. The show stands as a counter-argument to the idea that a sitcom concept doesn't sound great. A good sitcom relies on strong characters, not simply a high concept, and Friends is a hugely successful example of that. In the best ensemble shows, every character seems like the star, and that's certainly the case here. The 6 men and women have quirks and personalities that you can believe, and a comfortable, fluid relationship among them that makes it seem plausible that they are really friends. There are some smart moments in Friends, but those lines seem completely in character. Audiences never feel overly conscious of the writers at work. Contemporary critics compared Friends' opening episode to Seinfeld, and found it less sophisticated than the other comedy hit of the era. But such critiques seem to miss the point. Yes, like Seinfeld, Friends revolved around young people hanging out in New York. Yes, they dated and deliberated about their jobs, and yes, it is played for laughs. But the reality is it was at its centre a measured, slow burn and comforting romantic comedy. And unlike Seinfeld, which seemed to pride itself on being a show about nothing, the titular group of friends had plenty offbeat adventures, and a revolving door of characters who entered into and out of relationships with someone in the group. And as for us at IP, the show looks even better in retrospect. Compared with shows like Big Bang Theory or How I Met Your Mother, Friends almost qualifies as cinema verite. Sure, it does present a hyper-stylized and almost idealistic picture of being a young single adult, but then again that's part of its charm. There's something in it for everyone. Friends is for anyone who wants to look at one of the last great comedies to ever instill the comfort of the familiar in an audience, that seemed to hit all the way across the boards, coming from different cultural backgrounds and even age groups. Even if the show didn't quite make viewers want to dance in a fountain, there were times, many times, when it came close. The show's parting image also managed to be restrained and memorable, as the gang of 6 wandered out of Monica's bare apartment to go, well, where else, but for one last cup of coffee before moving on to pastures new, and from here on out, other Manhattan coffee lovers, perhaps even the audience themselves, will be able to enjoy their lattes from the comfort of that iconic happy orange couch. At that moment it was clear that the next phase would be adulthood. And, well, Joey. Independent Pictures.